Have you ever looked a man in the eye, someone you once called your brother, and realized in that exact moment he'd been plotting your downfall all along? My name is Ethan Morales. I'm 52 years old. And last Friday, the man I built a real estate empire with, Logan Kent, looked across our polished oak conference table and handed me a termination letter. It wasn't emotional. It wasn't loud. It was surgical. Nothing personal, he said. The board thinks it's time for new energy. New energy. That was his way of saying, you've outlived your usefulness. We started this company together 20 years ago, two guys in steel-toe boots flipping houses in East Austin. We fought side by side during recessions, we survived brutal projects, and we celebrated wins with greasy diner breakfasts and cheap whiskey. I trusted Logan like family. But when the money grew, so did his ego. And when I turned my back, he started rewriting the rules. This isn't a story about business. It's a story about trust, ambition, and quiet revenge. If you've ever been betrayed by someone who once stood beside you, stick around. And if this story hits something in you, let me know in the comments, subscribe, and give this video a like. You're going to want to hear how it ends. Logan Kent and I met when we were both 29, swinging hammers on a half-renovated duplex under the Texas sun. Back then, we were just two guys working jobs that barely paid the bills. He had a silver tongue that could talk inspectors into looking the other way, and I had the kind of hands-on grit that kept a project from falling apart. We didn't start out with dreams of boardrooms or million-dollar contracts. We started with busted knuckles, borrowed tools, and a shared idea we could build something bigger than just houses. We could build a name. Austin was still rough around the edges in those days. Gentrification hadn't swept through yet. There were old bungalows no one wanted, whole blocks where opportunity rotted in the heat. We saw the potential, so we pooled what little savings we had. He maxed out his credit card. I sold the truck my dad left me and bought our first property, a collapsing Craftsman with termites in the walls and raccoons in the attic. Most people laughed. We saw the beginning of something. The renovation nearly broke us. Logan had a gift for talking up investors and wrangling subcontractors, while I worked 16-hour days making sure the foundation didn't crack and the roof didn't cave in. There was no glamour, just sweat, second-hand lumber, and the stubborn belief that we were onto something. We flipped that house in 8 months, made a profit that felt like $1 million, even though it was barely enough to cover both of our debts. But we knew, if we could do that, once we could do it again. We called our company Oak and Stone Development. It wasn't flashy, but it felt solid, like the work we were doing. Over the next 5 years, we climbed. Small homes turned into multi-unit renovations, duplexes into townhome builds, eventually full-scale residential developments on Austin's east side. We built not just homes, but trust with clients, with banks, with city officials. Logan had the charisma, the public face. I had the plans, the permits, the crews. The unspoken agreement was clear. He sold the vision. I built the reality. There were long nights at the office, sketching out site plans on pizza boxes, clogged toilets on open house days, fistfights with unreliable framers. And through it all, Logan and I were a team. There was no need for lawyers or contracts between us. Just mutual respect and the kind of bond that only comes from pouring concrete side by side in 100-degree heat. I was the best man at his wedding. He gave the eulogy when my mother passed. People used to joke we were more married to each other than to our actual spouses. Looking back now, I think that kind of closeness made me blind. Because while I saw a brother, Logan saw something else entirely: opportunity. A chance to carve his name into the skyline, even if it meant cutting me out of the foundation we laid together. But I didn't know that then, not yet. The first cracks didn't look like betrayal. They looked like upgrades. Logan started talking about elevating the brand. He wanted to rework our website, hire a design firm from New York Switch, from hard hat site photos to sleek architectural renders. He bought a black Maserati with company money and justified it as image marketing. Meanwhile, I was still driving my beat-up Silverado, still showing up at 6 a.m. to make sure the cement pour started on time. He began missing site walkthroughs and progress meetings, said he was working on bigger fish. At first, I chalked it up to our growth. We were taking on larger developments, and someone had to be out there courting banks, zoning committees, investors. That was Logan's gift, and I respected it. But then I started noticing something subtle. He was polishing a narrative where he was the genius behind Oakenstone's success, and I was just the background guy. Reliable, replaceable. The first time I really felt it was at a developers conference downtown. Logan was on a panel titled Visionaries Reshaping Austin. I watched from the back as he spoke about revitalizing neighborhoods, managing multi-million-dollar projects, building trust with city planners. Not once did he mention me, our origin story, or even the team that built the homes he was so proud of. It wasn't a slip. It was calculated. I confronted him afterward casually. "You forgot to mention who laid the first beam in our first project," I said with a half smile. He didn't even flinch. Just clapped a hand on my shoulder and said, "You know how these things are, Ethan. They want a face, not a blueprint." That line stuck with me. Around the same time, our profit report started coming in later and less clearly. I asked our finance guy about it, but he said Logan had moved reporting under a new consulting structure. Then Logan hired a PR strategist to elevate our public image, and suddenly press releases about our projects had only one name on them, his. Our award submissions had only one quote, his. Our social media, only one face, his. I brushed it off for months, told myself I didn't care about attention or credit. I was building homes, not chasing headlines. But the real gut punch came when we closed a $19 million mixed-use development deal with the city. I had spent months working with engineers, city inspectors, even walking the property with the Planning Commission. But when the deal was signed and the press was called, Logan stood alone on the front page, hard hat in hand, shaking hands with the mayor. That night, I got an email from one of our longtime clients, someone we had helped through 3 flips and a full custom build. She congratulated me on the deal and said, "I didn't even realize you were still with Oakenstone. Everything seems to go through Logan now." That's when I felt it. Not anger, not even betrayal. Just the slow chill of realization. Something was shifting, and I was being written out of the story we had built together. It didn't happen all at once. Logan was too smart for that. He didn't kick down the door. He adjusted the locks while I was still inside. It started with the hiring of a new CFO. I wasn't consulted. One day there was just a new face in the Monday meeting, introduced as a game changer for our growth strategy. The guy was clean-cut Ivy League, barely 30, and spoke in buzzwords like scalability, asset leverage, and internal optimization. I asked him a question about our subcontractor payment structure, and he blinked at me like I'd spoken in code. Logan cut in smoothly. "Let's let Kevin focus on the big picture, Ethan. You've got the site-level stuff on lock. Site-level stuff." That's what I'd become. Then came the reorganization of department heads. Logan framed it as modernization. We now had a digital innovation lead, a brand culture officer, and a development advisor who had never stepped foot on a construction site. I was moved off project oversight and placed in a new role called Legacy Liaison. No real responsibilities, just a title, a desk, and a polite exile. The board meetings changed too. They used to be held in our old conference room where we'd scrawl numbers on whiteboards and drink too much bad coffee. Now they were catered lunches in downtown towers with a strategic advisory council, 3 new board members Logan had handpicked. They had no history with the company, no scars from the early days. Just expensive watches, practiced smiles, and a very clear understanding of who was in charge. One afternoon, I showed up to a board meeting and was told it had been rescheduled. When I asked Logan why I hadn't been notified, he smiled and said, "You're still looped in Ethan, just not in the operational flow. Don't worry, you'll get the recap notes." He was shutting me out slowly, but legally, and I let it happen. That's the part that still haunts me. I didn't push back. I believed foolishly that our history would protect me, that brothers don't betray each other for boardroom clout. That the man who once held my mother's hand at her funeral wouldn't sell me out for an IPO dream. But the signs were everywhere. He'd taken over our developer relationships, was signing deals solo, and started referring to Oakenstone as his vision in public interviews. I was becoming invisible. Even my team guys I had trained were now reporting to junior VPs Logan had brought in from other firms. One Friday morning, I arrived early to prep for a zoning commission call and found my office door locked. My nameplate had been removed. A maintenance guy told me he was told to convert the space into a client lounge. My files were boxed up in the hallway. When I asked Logan about it, he didn't apologize. He laughed. "Ethan, it's not personal. It's just structure. We're scaling. You've been foundational, but this next phase needs a different kind of leadership." I stared at him in silence. It hit me that he'd rehearsed that line, that maybe he'd said it before to investors, maybe even to the board. Maybe I wasn't even the last to find out. I walked back to what was now a hot desk in a side room and sat down. My hands trembled not from anger, but clarity. Logan wasn't just evolving the company. He was removing me from it, piece by quiet piece, and I had let him sharpen the blade. The final blow came on a Wednesday morning, clear skies, quiet office, nothing unusual, until Logan asked if I had a minute to chat. We stepped into the glass-walled conference room that used to feel like ours. Now it felt like I'd wandered into someone else's firm. 3 board members were already seated, legal folders spread neatly on the table. I knew immediately this wasn't a chat. This was a setup. Logan wore his usual polished smile, the one he used with city planners and investors. "Ethan," he said, his tone calm, too calm. "This conversation is about transition. The board feels the company is entering a phase that requires a different kind of direction, faster, leaner, more aligned with market dynamics." I didn't respond. I looked at the folders, the prepared documents, the clean exit plan written by someone who had clearly been working on this for weeks, maybe months. Severance terms, equity buyout, an NDA clause. It was all there, legally tight, emotionally hollow. "You built this company," one board member said, trying to sound respectful. "But to stay competitive, we need new leadership energy." I turned to Logan. "When did you decide this?" He blinked, once the mask slipping just a bit. "It's been in discussion for a while. That discussion ever include me?" He didn't answer. I didn't yell. I didn't curse. I sat down, opened the folder, and skimmed through what 21 years of work had been reduced to numbers, valuations, and phrases like market realignment. I saw my name next to phrases like legacy phase-out and internal repositioning. They hadn't just planned this behind my back, they'd branded it. I signed. Not because I agreed, but because I understood something Logan had forgotten. Clients don't do business with a name on a building. They do business with people, with trust. And I had earned that trust over 2 decades of showing up early, muddy reliable. The loyalty didn't belong to Oakenstone. It belonged to me. After the signatures, Logan extended his hand. No hard feelings, I shook it. No feelings at all. I walked out of that room with a single box, 1 family photo, a worn notebook, and a mug from our first office, with a crack down the handle. My exit wasn't dramatic. It was quiet, surgical, just like Logan wanted. But what he didn't know, what none of them realized, was that I had no intention of disappearing. I drove to a diner across town, ordered coffee, and opened that same worn notebook. It still had my early notes from our first project, back when we didn't have a company name or an accountant. And as I flipped the pages, I remembered a clause we had written into our earliest contracts back when trust was real and our handshake meant something. A clause that Logan had either forgotten or never understood. And in that moment, over burnt coffee and lined paper, the next chapter of the story began. Not one of revenge, one of restoration, one of reclaiming what was mine. The next morning, I drove straight to the office of a man I hadn't spoken to in years. Miles Chandler, my old real estate attorney from back when Oakenstone was just a dream, scribbled on napkins. He looked older, grayer, but his mind was still sharp as ever. We sat across from each other in his quiet office as I placed our original partnership agreement on the table like a loaded weapon. "Miles," I said, "I need you to go through this line by line, especially anything tied to client ownership, project origination, or service relationships." He put on his glasses, cracked his knuckles, and went to work. I sat silently, the sounds of his page flipping and highlighter clicks the only noise in the room. After 20 minutes, he stopped. "Section 14, he said, tapping the document. "You remember this?" I leaned in. The language was familiar, but I hadn't thought about it in years. Back then, we had added that clause to protect ourselves in case Oak and Stone ever dissolved, back when we thought the only threat would come from outside the company, not within it. It stated that all client relationships secured personally by name signature or ongoing consultation could remain the property of the individual who originated them, even in the event of separation from the firm. This clause, Miles said, gives you ownership of the clients you brought in and maintained, not just as a company rep, but as an individual consultant. It's rare, but it's enforceable. I sat back, stunned. I had spent the better part of 2 decades building those relationships, walking sites, negotiating terms over kitchen tables, showing up at city hearings. And now those years weren't just memories. They were leverage, legal leverage. "Miles," I said slowly, "if I were to start my own firm, quietly, would these clients have the right to follow me? If you don't breach your non-compete and you don't solicit them directly," he said, "they absolutely can. And they likely will. You've been their point of trust for years." That was the moment the fog lifted. Logan thought he had boxed me out, erased me from the blueprint of Oak and Stone. But he missed the most important line we ever wrote. He thought he owned the company. But I still owned the trust, and trust in our world builds faster than concrete, and it holds even longer. I didn't make a single phone call that day, not yet. I knew the rules, and I had no intention of giving Logan any ammunition. My non-compete was airtight, at least on paper. Direct solicitation of clients would get me dragged into court faster than I could open a business checking account. But conversations, hypotheticals. Checking in on old relationships with no promises or pitches, that was a different game, and I was ready to play. That night I sat at my kitchen table with a legal pad and a stiff glass of bourbon. I began writing a list, not of properties, but of people, real people, clients whose hands I'd shaken, whose backyards I'd walked, whose parents I'd hugged at ribbon cuttings. These weren't just names in a CRM, they were relationships built slowly, with real sweat and real trust. Over 19 years, I'd worked directly with 38 major clients. Of those, 24 were still active in projects that I had personally designed, negotiated, or overseen. I didn't need to steal anything. All I had to do was remind them who they'd really been working with all these years. My first call came 2 days later. I phoned Heather Tran, a longtime client who had entrusted us with 6 flip-to-rent projects and a mid-sized subdivision that was still under planning review. I didn't pitch her. I didn't even mention Logan. I simply said, "Heather, I wanted to let you know I've stepped away from Oak and Stone. There's going to be some changes on your project." There was a pause. "Wait," she said, "you're not managing it anymore?" "No, but I've got something in the works. Nothing official yet." Her tone shifted instantly. "Ethan, we signed those deals because you were involved. That's the only reason. Keep me updated, please." That was the pattern. I spoke with Carlos Mendoza-Leah and Greg Rosenbaum Wesley Cho, all long-standing clients who knew my work, knew my word, and didn't like the idea of continuing without it. I never asked them to leave Oak and Stone. I didn't have to. I just reminded them subtly that relationships are built with people, not logos. Meanwhile, I began assembling my base. A friend from college helped me register an LLC under the name Ironmark Development. A former site manager who had left Oak and Stone last year joined as a project lead. And then there was Mariah Alvarez, my former assistant, fired by Logan 3 weeks after I left. She called me in tears. I offered her a job the next day. I leased a modest office above a small law firm, ironically just 5 blocks from Oak and Stone's shiny new HQ. I didn't need glass walls and exposed beams. I needed a whiteboard, a desk, and a phone line. Logan had made the mistake of believing that silence meant surrender. But I was never retreating. I was reloading. Logan didn't stay quiet for long. 3 days after I registered Ironmark Development, my phone buzzed with a blocked call. I let it go to voicemail. 10 minutes later, Mariah popped her head into my new office, holding her phone. "You're going to want to hear this," she said. It was Logan. His voice was sharp, overly polite, the kind of tone he used when he was trying not to sound furious. "Ethan, I've been hearing some unsettling things. Clients asking about you, confusion about project transitions. You know your agreement, and I trust you're not trying anything that would put you in legal jeopardy." He was rattled. Good. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Because while Logan was drafting cease and desist letters and calling up attorneys, I was making coffee with future partners, sketching out a scaled-down but streamlined business model, and quietly preparing for client meetings where the clients had asked me to talk. Within a week, Logan launched his own counteroffensive. A PR piece appeared in a local development magazine announcing a strategic restructuring at Oak and Stone. My name wasn't mentioned, but the article made pointed references to renewed leadership and a fresh operational vision free of legacy constraints. He was trying to poison the well before anyone realized he was the one who cracked it. Then came the legal letters, thinly veiled threats dressed up in formal language. Reminder of non-compete obligations. Unauthorized use of internal knowledge. Misleading communications. Each one sent through his corporate counsel, none of them holding real teeth. Miles read them over and laughed. "He's flailing," he said. "These are scare tactics, not strategy. He's trying to make noise while the foundation shifts under him." But the real sign that Logan was losing grip came from the clients themselves. Patricia Nunez, one of our largest commercial clients, forwarded me an email Logan's team had sent her. It was titled Continuity and Reassurance. But the body of the email sounded nervous, rushed. It offered discounts, promises, new project managers, all to make up for my absence. "Ethan," she wrote to me, "I don't want discounts. I want results. Call me when you're ready." Logan had underestimated something vital. You can't market your way out of losing trust. And in the real estate business, trust is the only thing more valuable than land. I was working late one night when my office door creaked open. Mariah stepped inside, her face pale, but determined, holding a flash drive in one hand and a folder in the other. She shut the door behind her. "I need to show you something," she said. She placed the folder on my desk first. Inside were printed emails, internal memos, meeting agendas, all from Logan's final months at Oak and Stone. "These are copies I made before he locked me out of the system," she whispered. I didn't know if I'd ever need them, but I couldn't let it all disappear. I started reading. My stomach tightened with each page. Logan hadn't just planned my removal, he had engineered it. Every board member vote, every legal adjustment, every PR move had been methodically orchestrated. Worse buried among the emails was a name that chilled me: Iron Ridge Capital Partners, a hedge fund known for acquiring mid-sized real estate firms, gutting them, and flipping the assets. "He's been negotiating a sale," Mariah said. "That's why he needed you out of the way. Your equity, your influence, you were the last piece in his way." She then slid over the flash drive. "This has everything. Internal spreadsheets, communication logs, client project status reports, stuff Logan tried to scrub, but I backed it all up before I was fired." I looked at her. "Why are you doing this?" She shrugged. "Because I saw what he did to you, and because Oak and Stone used to stand for something. I'm not going to let him burn it all down and walk away clean." That flash drive was dynamite. Inside were emails where Logan openly discussed restructuring timelines for the sale-cutting costs by replacing experienced staff with junior hires and pushing through last-minute zoning approvals to inflate company value. The kicker one file contained a draft purchase agreement dated 2 months before my termination. He had already committed to selling Oak and Stone before he pushed me out. The entire leadership transition had been a corporate hit job wrapped in legal jargon and masked with smiles. He didn't just want me gone. He needed me gone quietly before the ink dried. But Logan had miscalculated something fundamental. Mariah wasn't just an assistant. She was the operational backbone of the company. She knew who the clients were, what they expected, and where all the real leverage lay. She had scheduled every major deal, managed every high-stakes deadline. She didn't just keep calendars, she kept receipts. I leaned back in my chair, overwhelmed, then smiled. Logan thought he was playing chess. But he had forgotten the most dangerous piece on the board, the one who remembers everything. 2 weeks after that night with Mariah, Ironmark Development officially opened its doors. Our office was a modest second-floor space above a law firm tucked behind an unmarked glass door. No fancy signage, no PR push. Just clean desks, white walls, a shared coffee machine, and a whiteboard filled with client names written in black marker, 24 of them. These weren't just leads. These were people ready to move the moment I gave the word. We went live on a Tuesday morning at 9 a.m. By 9:15, the first email came in Patricia Nunes. Ready to talk next steps, she wrote. By noon, I had 6 confirmed transition meetings on the calendar. By the end of the week, I had signed full contracts with 14 of our largest past clients' projects that represented more than 60% of Oak & Stone's active revenue stream. What stunned me wasn't just the speed, it was the relief in their voices. Every call I made followed the same rhythm. Concern, then clarity, then confidence. Ethan, thank God. I didn't feel comfortable with the new team. Logan's people don't even understand the scope of what we were building. Whatever you're doing, I'm in. They weren't leaving for better rates or flashier promises. They were leaving because they knew me. They had worked with me. And in an industry where one misstep on a zoning plan can cost millions, familiarity is currency. Logan, for all his branding and big talk, didn't understand that. By the end of our first 30 days, Ironmark had 22 active clients, 3 new hires, and $2.4 million in projected revenue. We were small, yes, but lean, precise, and trusted. Meanwhile, across the street, Oak & Stone was starting to show cracks. Word got around fast in Austin's real estate circles. People were whispering. Subcontractors began pulling out of long-term deals. New investors were hesitant. Logan tried to reassure them with press releases and forced optimism, but it was obvious something was bleeding out from inside. One Friday afternoon, Logan called. He didn't yell, didn't threaten. His voice was tight, almost trembling. "You've stolen half our client base." I leaned back in my chair, looking out the window at his sleek office tower across the street. I didn't steal anything I said. I honored the trust I earned, the trust you threw away. There was a long silence on the line. "You've made your point," he said finally. "No," I replied. "The clients made theirs." And with that, I ended the call. I turned to Mariah and said, "Let's get back to work." We weren't just building homes anymore. We were building something that couldn't be bought, branded, or faked. Reputation, loyalty, legacy. The collapse didn't happen overnight, but it happened faster than anyone expected. Within 6 weeks of Ironmark's launch, Oak & Stone's project pipeline had dried up. Developers who once scrambled to get on Logan's calendar were now ghosting his calls. Contractors began defaulting on timelines. Rumors swirled that key investors were pulling out. And the whispers, those quiet, merciless industry whispers, started to echo in every real estate event, every networking happy hour, every planning commission meeting in Austin. They weren't saying Logan's company was failing. They were saying he got outplayed. The final blow came when Clearwater Heights, a 90-unit development Oak & Stone had been banking on, pulled their contract and publicly announced they were moving forward with Ironmark. Patricia Nunes didn't just make the switch. She gave a statement to Austin Business Review that made it very clear we trusted Ethan Morales. "We didn't sign with a firm, we signed with a person. Logan tried everything. He offered steep discounts, brought in new faces, hired a crisis PR team that spun a leadership evolution narrative. But it didn't matter. because what was broken wasn't the company. It was the trust. His final desperation move was to file complaints, accusations of breach of contract, unethical client poaching violations of non-compete clauses. But when the legal dust settled, all of it collapsed under the weight of one document, the partnership agreement. Section 14, the clause that gave me ownership of every client I had personally cultivated. The judge didn't just dismiss Logan's claim, he warned him about filing baseless suits. By month 3, Oak & Stone had lost nearly 70% of its billing capacity. Several staff members quit without notice. Vendors stopped extending credit. A few of the new board members quietly stepped down. Mariah forwarded me the article the following Monday. It was the lead story in the Austin Ledger Oak & Stone development files for Chapter 11, From Skyline Dreams to Empty Offices. The photo showed Logan walking out of his building with his tie loosened head-down phone to his ear. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. Because even if you win watching someone torch what you both built, it still hurts. Logan didn't just lose a business. He lost the only thing he couldn't rebrand: his credibility. People think revenge is loud, explosive, destructive, theatrical. But real revenge, the kind that lasts, is quiet. It moves with discipline. It's not about crushing your enemies. It's about outlasting them with integrity, intact. Logan thought power was in control titles, money perception. But real power is trust. And trust doesn't come from boardrooms or branding. It comes from years of showing up when no one's watching. I didn't destroy Oak & Stone. Logan did when he forgot the difference between ambition and arrogance, when he replaced partnership with ego. All I did was honor the relationships I had spent 2 decades building. That's not sabotage. That's legacy. Today, Ironmark Development is thriving. We're not the biggest firm in Austin, but we're the most trusted. And for me, that's enough. If this story resonated with you because you've lost something or someone tried to write you out, just know this: loyalty still matters. Quiet strength still matters. And character. It always wins in the end. Drop a comment below if you've ever rebuilt something they tried to take from you. I rebuilt in silence. Say that if this hit home. I'll be reading. And if you're still here, you already know what to do. Like, subscribe. Share it with someone who needs a reminder. Some empires are built with steel, others with loyalty.